Now,
can I have your attention about the workplace pension? Did I forget to mention? Millions of people are already benefiting from being enrolled in the workplace pension. So can I have your attention?
well, that's the latest government advert for auto enrolment into a pension at work. But there are concerns that the pensions people are automatically being enrolled into are too expensive. And Pensions Minister Steve Webb has said he wants to cap the cost of auto-enrolled pensions. In a consultation published this week, he proposed to limit the charges at either 0.75% or perhaps 1% a year. Well, live now to talk to Pensions Minister Steve Webb. Steve Webb, why 0.75% when the average of new schemes is said to be around 0.5%?
What's happening is we're starting with Britain's biggest employers, so the banks, the building societies, have been able to negotiate rock-bottom charges from the pension companies. And the concern is that over the coming years, when we get to smaller firms, they just won't get the same deals. And therefore, whilst we think that 0.75, for example, is the sort of level at which we will have providers in the market to give choice to employers, if we were to go much lower, then we might well find that there wasn't provision in the market. So it's getting down well below what might otherwise happen, and it's half the charge on a stakeholder at the moment.
Yes, indeed. But that it's still a lot more than is being charged. And isn't the danger that people with these small employers will more and more think, well, it's not worth it? I mean, a 0.75% charge can take nearly a fifth of your money over a working life out of your pension just in charges.
Well, the crucial thing about the workplace pension is that you put your money in and you gain the employer contribution and tax relief. So at the minimum level of contributions, your pound becomes £2 straight away. And I defy even Moneybox listeners to come up with an investment that does that overnight. Now, of course, charges matter. That's why we're doing this. We're also looking at banning other charges, like the charge that applies as soon as you leave a firm when they jack up the charge. We're looking at banning that. We've already banned another set of charges this year called consultancy charges. So we're making sure as much money as possible of people's hard-earned cash turns into a pension.
And the cap is just on what's called the annual management charge, but that doesn't include other things, does it, like the cost of buying and selling shares and so on. Do you think if people knew the whole cost of a pension, it would put them off and they wouldn't bother?
Well, just to be clear, the cap we're consulting on, it could well be a much broader definition of that. So what we don't want to do is just cap a very narrow set of charges and then find the industry just grabs the money from some other way. So we're looking at a broader definition than just annual charges. But on the wider issue about what information people need, we certainly need clear information. But we market test these things. We talk to consumers, and we find that if you just bamboozle them with vast amounts of facts and figures and reams of paperwork, it completely baffles people. What we need is like news you can use, simple information about charges capped by the government.
Yes, and also just low charges, because if you don't bother to read the material, you don't want a surprise at the end of your working life. So you've got to... Why didn't you have a low cap, like 0.5%, and then maybe say, we're going to drive it down to 0.3%, which they manage in some countries, don't they? Challenge the industry.
Well, I mean, one of the things about the 0.75 is it's well below what I think many people would otherwise have got, particularly where they've, for example, left a scheme where people are paying a lot more than that already. But there's no reason why a charge cap once set couldn't in future be lowered. So we have to get the thing in, see the impact on the market. But, it's available to be lowered if that's feasible.
So you might bring it down. And finally, other schemes. The OFT says £40 billion of pension money tied up in old funds, nothing to do with auto-enrolment, giving poor value for money, charging 2% a year. Will you move on to those other funds once you've settled auto-enrolment?
Yes, so we've given ourselves legal powers. One of the things I was astonished by was we've had to keep amending the legislation to give ourselves broader and broader powers to cap charges in a wider range of schemes. So we now have the powers to cap even the charges in closed pension schemes. There's a big audit going on at the moment of what's going on in those closed schemes. And, if a firm wants to use an old scheme for auto-enrolment, they won't be able to use it if it's a high-cost scheme because of the cap.
No, but you have the power, Steve Webb. You're only going to be Minister till 2015. It may be longer, but, definitely till then. When are you going to do something?
Well, some of the powers are in the bill that finished the House of Commons on Tuesday night, so it's got to go through the House of Lords.
Well,
and then
Wednesday morning, then. OK, Steve, Pensions Minister, thanks. Listening to that is Jennie Kreser, partner and pension specialist at the City Lawyers, Silverman, Sherlicka. Jennie Kreser, this cap, is it a reasonable start, as Steve Webb's saying?
I don't think it's an unreasonable start. I think that he was probably right to suggest that there needs to be some incentive for insurers to remain in this market, especially as the smaller employers start to stage what's called stage into auto-enrolment. because the likelihood is that they will not have the same options as has currently been the case with the large employers that we've had at the moment.
Yes, but why is the industry such that it's going to take more money from small employers when it's quite happy to do deals with big employers? Why don't they offer the same deal to everyone? This is discriminating against small employers who aren't happy about this auto-enrolment altogether anyway, are they?
I think that's probably right. But of course, it's a bit like economies of scale. So if you've got an employer that's only got, say, 50 employees, it's going to cost pro rata a lot more to administer the scheme for those 50 than it would be for 5,000. So I think that's the fear that there will be this problem of capacity coming along.
But won't they go into one of the schemes like Nest or yes, and that will just be easier for them because they'll all be in one big scheme anyway?
Yes, I suspect that a lot of them will go into Nest, but of course Nest itself is not actually necessarily the cheap option.
No, because it has a big upfront charge of 1.8%, doesn't it? Though it is 0.3 after that. So if you're in it a long time, it's not too bad. And how do you think people would react if they did know the true cost of a pension? You know, you're putting all this money in, OK, you'll get something at the end. Tens of thousands come out for the firm. Will people be getting decent pensions out of auto-enrolment?
Well, my personal view is they may not. The fact is that the level of contribution going in at approximately 8% simply...
And that's of a band of income.
And that's
so
of
it's
a band of
actually
income.
More like 6.5%.
Exactly. The chances are that that won't buy them anything like a decent pension when they come to retire. And my concern is that a lot of people will be not missold, that's perhaps putting it a little high, but perhaps will be somewhat disappointed when they realise that all of this actually will lead to not very much. Can I just say, though, that the principle of auto-enrolment is the right one?
The right way, indeed, but it's just putting enough in. It's putting in more than you're forced to, which will make sure you have a decent pension. Jennie Kreser from Silverman Sherlicker, thanks very much.